Well, hey there! Happy Father's Day! We love you, we're grateful for you, and we appreciate everything that you do for us on behalf of all of us here at the Olive Branch, and welcome to our online experience. My name is Jeremiah, I'm the Easy Young Adults Pastor here at the Olive Branch, and we're so glad that you're able to join us. And please, the weather is so good. Join us in person. If you're in the area, avoid the online, come in person. We want to get to know you. Sundays at 10 a.m., especially this coming Sunday. We have our baptism service Sunday, June 23rd. You don't want to miss out with these amazing individuals taking their step, going public in their faith in Jesus. We want to support them, we want to celebrate them, and we want you to be there. So come and join us at 10 a.m. on a Sunday, especially this Sunday, or throughout the summer. You're more than welcome to join us. But we do have a service right now. Pastor Ken is going to end his series on how's that working for you. It's been such an amazing series, and we hope you've been blessed by that. And our worship team is going to lead us in worship. So let's have an amazing Sunday. Happy Father's Day again. We love you. We're so grateful for you. And we hope to see you all online, in person, very soon on a Sunday. God bless. Bye.
You with the dawn, our souls awake to you and lift a song. We've seen the things that you have done, and still we know the best is yet to come. There's more to come. Open the gates and let your glory come down. Open our hearts and let our worship pour out. Hey! Your presence here is all we need. You break our chains with sounds of victory. You're changing everything. Now open the gates and let your glory come down. Open our hearts and let our worship pour out. Open the gates and let your glory come down. Open our hearts and let our worship pour out. Come flood this space. No one else could take your place. Come have your way. No one else could take your place. Come flood this space. No one else could take your place. Come have your way. No one else could take your place. Open the gates and let your glory come down. Open our hearts and let our worship pour out. Open the gates and let your glory
So I may be better than some of you at not asking for help because I'm pretty good at it. Let me give you kind of a case in point. Lori and I were putting an addition on our house, and I'm trying to put this 4x12 piece of drywall on a ceiling all by myself because I didn't want to ask anybody, and of course it didn't work. I ended up actually having to ask somebody to help me and found out that they actually have machines that can help you do this. And somebody could have asked me when I'm in the middle of messing around with all these 2x4s and screw guns and everything, trying to get this thing on the ceiling. So Ken, how's that working for you? Well, it wasn't working for me. That was the issue. So most guys, Father's Day, most guys would be willing to say, I don't like to ask for help, because it makes me feel weak. I mean, if you watch a Spider-Man movie, you don't aspire to be the person hanging helplessly from the balcony waiting to be rescued. You want to be Spider-Man. You want to be the person who goes out there and gets it done. I had a gait mishap just a couple weeks ago and ended up with a Band-Aid on my finger. So my granddaughter asked me, so, Grandpap, did you cry? And I said, no. Well, and I didn't even, say ow or anything like that, because, you're kind of trained from being a kid, that, you suck it up. You don't, cry around, kids will say, you want your mommy, you're going to cry, and it's just one of these things that kind of gets worked into your life, and nobody wants to ask for help. Nobody wants to admit they're in pain. It's just one of these things. It's a guy thing, I think. I'm not saying it's a healthy thing, but it tends to be a guy thing. Stats basically kind of confirm some of this. They say that guys tend to be more competitive. Guys tend to be more loners than they are collaborative. Women are much more collaborative. Like, they'll get a team working on something and they'll get it done. Guys, we just want to do it by ourselves. You want to have something to show for what you're doing. Like, it probably is good for connection's sake to go for a walk with your wife or your kids or something like that. But, guys tend to think, well, mowing the lawn is kind of taking a walk, and I have something to show for it when I'm done. That's just kind of how we think, okay? And we're impressed with big, powerful, things like we'd rather go to a monster truck show than go to an antique mall and so on. Like, I think I'm speaking for most guys here. So, produce. That's what we want to see. We want to make it happen. We want to produce. We admire people who can make that happen and so on. And the problem with that is that isn't necessarily what life is all about. And you can burn through a lot of life and not realize that. And that's what I want to talk about today. In the world system, producing is way bigger deal than connecting. But in eternity, apparently the question isn't did you produce? It's not like, what was your GPA, and how many degrees did you get, and, how many companies did you start? The question is, did you love? Paul, who is a guy that produced more than just about anybody else, he said, when push gets to shove, he says, the question is, did you love? If you didn't do it with love, it's not worth anything. So that's a big, big deal in a produce world. Now, the controlling metaphor for what we've been talking about in this series, how's that working for you, has been, what Jesus had to say, where he says, I am the vine, you are the branches, and you need to remain in me. You need to be connected to me, because without me, you can't do anything. You can't produce what you want to produce. Yes, I am the vine, you are the branches. Those who remain in me and I in them will produce much fruit. That's where producing comes from. So, here's the deal. Remembering, who you are and what you're capable of and what you're not capable of is a very, very important part of following Jesus. Without me, unless you're connected to me, you can't do anything. Now, one of the guys in the Bible who probably produced more than a lot of other people, Paul was one of them, but the other guy was Solomon. You've ever seen the World Book of Records, Guinness World Book of Records. He would be all over the pages there because he set so many records himself. He was incredible. He was the son of a superstar dad by the name of David. And there is nobody who outperforms Solomon. Now, it's really interesting, David was an incredible guy. He was known for his humility. He was known for his truthfulness. He was a tough, fearless warrior. I mean, big, strong men would wet themselves around him because he was so tough. Other, big, powerful men wanted to be around him when he was at war because he was really good at what he did. Now, Solomon wasn't that. And maybe that was part of the factor of why he felt like he needed to produce and produce and produce and so on. But Solomon accomplished a lot. He really did. And here's what's interesting about him is that he started out very humble. God actually gave him, you ask for it and I'll give it to you. And so it's like a blank check. Solomon says, just give me wisdom. I'm going to be leading these people and I don't know what I'm doing. I need your help. And God was pleased with his answer. God gave him wisdom and pretty much gave him everything else as well. Now, David had stored up a whole bunch of supplies and so on, gold, silver, bronze, all the stonework and wood and everything like that to build a temple. He didn't build it himself, so he handed it all over to Solomon, who spent the next 20 years building the temple for God and building his own home. It says, basically the baseline is that, the temple that he built for God was one of the wonders of the ancient world. I mean, it was an amazing temple, and it was part of that, it was in doing that, when he dedicated it, God was pleased and God showed up to him. You read about him, and I'll tell you what, I mean, his personal paycheck was 25 tons of gold every year. So if you can imagine that this rock, was a piece of gold, imagine a dump truck of this landing on your lawn every year, 25 tons of gold. He was amazing. And just to make sure he didn't have any political issues and problems with people coming in, he had, I think 12,000 stallions and 1,500 chariots, which was, pretty significant amount of arms back in that day. He had a whole system of trading ships, and he traded all over the world. This 25 tons of gold didn't even include all the revenue that came in from trading, which was a lot. And if you've ever read the book of Proverbs, you know that this guy was wise. I mean, he was really smart. And these proverbs are not like the whole chapter on each form of wisdom. These are kind of like the headlights on it, because he was just so brilliant, incredible. He was like he stood above every other king in his day. His mom was Bathsheba, and of course everybody knew the tawdry story of her and David and what happened, and he went to the woman next door. So it's almost like Solomon, to make sure that he didn't go after the woman next door, he just married them all, okay? He had 700 wives of foreign birth and 300 concubines, which were kind of almost a wife, but not really, okay? Now, these marriages weren't necessarily about love. I mean, Solomon did write a book of love. It's called The Song of Solomon, and, pretty interesting book and so on. But I don't think he was necessarily really great at love. I mean, how much love can you have, he may have been good at, having sex, but with 700 wives, 300 concubines, and so on, you can't really call that love. But what this was basically a form of insurance. See, he made all these treaties with other kings, and then he'd marry their daughter, because if you have their daughter in your home and their grandkids running around in your palace, you got a pretty secure deal when it comes to, the kind of financial deals you're going to make and in terms of military security. So in his life, man, he did a lot. He had a lot. Now, here's what's sad. It appears that the more he accomplished, the more he had, the more he forgot about God. His humility went down, his pride went up, and eventually he lost the connection. Now, this is kind of the connect. This is the connect kind of diagram and so on. You have to stay connected if you're going to bear fruit, if you're going to bear good fruit. So that's kind of the way it works. And here's what's interesting about Solomon. He blew everything out of the water in terms of the commands that God had given kings about what to do and what not to do. Listen to what it says here. The king must not build up large stables of horses for himself. Hello, 12,000 stallions. He must not send his people to Egypt to buy horses, like he was Amazon, and Egypt was the one that, supplied the horses and the chariots. For the Lord has told you, you must never return to Egypt, which he did. He married a princess of Egypt. The king must not take many wives for himself. Hello, 700 wives, 300 concubines, because they will turn his heart away from the Lord. And he must not accumulate large amounts of wealth in silver and gold for himself. 25 tons of gold a year, and they said that in the country, the silver was like rocks on the ground. Now, the king was supposed to read these. Solomon was supposed to read these. He was supposed to have like a copy of them stapled or taped to his throne. Why? So he doesn't get proud and begin to think he's better than everyone else. That was what the guidelines were for. In this book of wisdom, Solomon wrote down these well-known words. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Do not depend on your own understanding. Seek his will in all you do, and he will show you which path to take. And that is precisely what Solomon didn't do, refused to do. Now you could ask, why? Why? Was it because David was so well loved, and he was so well admired and so on, and such an incredible warrior that Solomon felt like he kind of had to outdo him in some way? Was it because of his learning? Because of his gift of wisdom? Like he just got to the point where he thought he was too smart for God because he was the smartest person in every other room? Was it because he built this magnificent temple for God, and offered all these offerings, and he thought, okay, well, that's done. I did my God thing, and now I'm going to get on with my life. I don't know. We aren't really told. Being able to produce, being able to make it happen, being able to get the gold and impress other people with how well you do and how smart you are and how much money you make and how many degrees you have is what the heart craves. We want to impress other people. We want other people to admire us. And I'm pretty sure that that's what this had to do with. I mean, you have other kings from other countries coming. Well, can you advise us, Solomon? Queen of Sheba, I've never seen anything like this. This is better than anything I've ever told. I'm guessing that, Solomon on a regular basis was, breaking the buttons off of his shirts. And honestly, we go through life and, that somebody's got the scorecard. I mean, that's kind of the way it works in our world, right? How impressive can you be? How many people follow you? What do you have? What kind of car do you drive? What's your renown? What's your reputation like out there? Show me your resume. A grad by the name of Kyle Martin was the one who gave this speech, and it was called the 16th Second. It went viral, I think, back in about 2020. He actually gave it in 2019. But he talks about all the effort and all the sacrifices that he made and everything that he did to graduate, magna cum laude, to be the valedictorian of his class. Listen to what he says about it. He says this in his speech. It's so good for about 15 seconds. Yeah, 15 seconds of my heart pounding and my adrenaline pumping. 15 seconds of, I won. 15 seconds of being at the top of my pile of accomplishments, and it felt euphoric. But there must come a 16th second. And on that 16th second, I sat down on my seat, I looked at my silver stole that says valedictorian, and I thought, that's it? What just happened? Why am I not feeling anything else? And he goes on to say, I'm not sure what I expected. Maybe you prayed, a balloon dropped from the ceiling and so on. My problems just fade away. But he said, after that, on that 16th second, I felt nothing. And I never thought that that's what I would ever feel. Remember the controlling metaphor? I am the vine, you are the branches. And it's when you stay connected to me that you're going to bear much fruit. Because without me, without the vine, you can't do anything. You can't accomplish anything that you think that you should be able to accomplish. Now, Jesus gave this right before he, sent out, like this is the night before he died. So his disciples are going to carry on his mission. And when he sat down, you think about this. This is the last probably hour he's going to spend with them. And he doesn't, sit out there in Gethsemane, in this Olive Garden and present an org chart and tell them, just about, there's no job descriptions of what they need to do, and there's no, key accomplishments that they need to make, in the first year, and key places they need to get to. Nothing like that. He simply says, without me, you can do nothing. You need to stay connected to me. And that was the recipe for changing the world. And they did. Now, I just want you to think for just a minute. Jesus said that All of life, what God wants from us is to love God with all of our heart, soul, strength, and mind. And he says also, the second commandment is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. Before Jesus left his disciples and went to the cross that day, that evening, he said, I want you to love one another just as I have loved you. That's the platinum rule. That's the one that trumps everything. So, is this about production or is it about connection? I mean, go ahead, take a shot. What do you think? Where does love come from? Well, God is love, and love comes from him. So, is it safe to say that in our world, June 16th, Father's Day, 2024, people tend to value production over connection? That's what it seems like. And when you look at Solomon's life, this is pretty much what happened. And I think we're kind of tempted to go this direction too. As his production went up, or I should say went down, as it grew, the connection shrunk. And sometimes that's what happens to us unless we're really, really careful. See, I think that, built right into the fabric of our culture is, you got to produce. Like, make it happen. Like, get out there, get to work, and everything like that. And that's why we're all tempted to put this first and to miss the connection point where we say, Jesus said, you got to stay connected to me because without me, you can do nothing. We live in a performance-oriented world. I mean, we get this fed to us with our mother's milk. There's this natural bent that we have to be task-oriented rather than people-oriented. This is true. I mean, hopefully we can get the task done and we can care for people. But the problem is that sometimes, we will sacrifice, caring for people, over, to get the task done. I think it goes deeper than that. I mean, I think it's possible that some of you may have not felt accepted by your family, by your dad, by your mom, unless you achieved. For guys, it was like when you scored out there, on the hockey rink, that your dad came and put his arm around you and said, attaboy, And if you just sat on the bench, it was a pretty quiet ride home that day. It's when when you get the A's and when you get the B's on your report card and you bring it home and they celebrate it, yay, way to go, and you bring home a C-, it's like, well, what's wrong with you? What happened to you? My wife, Lori, tells me about a time with her dad. She's a little girl, and she's walking around the whole yard, the whole property there, picking up bent, rusted nails. You know why? It's because she just wanted some affirmation from his dad, and he wasn't really all that good at giving it. So this happens in a lot of places. Sometimes it happens, if you went to Sunday school or if you went to vacation Bible school or if you went to camp or something like that. What does the camper of the week, what do they get rewarded for? Well, they get awarded for, if you're in a Bible camp, for Bible memory, for bringing your Bible, helping clean up and stuff like this. It's doing in our world that it basically gets rewarded. And we begin to think that that's the way it is with God. That, God loves us because of how much we accomplish, how well we perform, what we do. You talk to people, about getting connected with God and say, well, you know what, I got some stuff I got to clean up in my life before I get connected. I got some things I got to do, I got to read my Bible more. I got to pray more, thinking that, that the stuff, that performance is what gets his attention. That's opposite. Jesus flipped the whole thing upside down. He said, God accepts you as you are. And then he helps you to become the person that you should be. And then in a world like ours, another factor in this whole, thing of production over connection is the BS factor. Now, I know that you probably know that by BS, I mean bootstraps. People like to think I can pull myself up in my own bootstraps. I don't need help from anybody. I can do this by myself. And it's just sad because Jesus was clear. Without me, you can do nothing. You can't pull yourself up by your own bootstraps, at least to get where you need to go. I am the only one who can give you what you need. And you think about that. Where does fruit come from? It doesn't come from a disconnected branch, does it? Anybody here ever seen, dead branch laying on the ground, growing fruit and, getting green and becoming resilient? It doesn't happen. When you look at it, you think, okay, that's got to be fake because that's not real. We know that doesn't happen in real life. In fact, Really, I mean, apart from connection, I mean, our cell phones are amazing. We can do all kinds of stuff. We can call people in other countries and play games, and send emails, and, who knows what you can't do with this thing. But I tell you what, what the electric company would basically say is, without me, you're nothing. You got to plug in someplace or this thing's going to go dead and it's going to be useless. It's going to be a boat anchor. Everything needs to be plugged in, and you need to understand where the power comes from. It doesn't come from me, and it doesn't come from you. And we want fruit, don't we? We want to be able to love other people. We want to have joy in our hearts. We want to live with peace. We want to be patient with the people around us, We want to learn how to be kind. We want to be good. We want to be faithful in what we do. And we know we desperately need humility, even though it just seems to, go far away from us. And that's where it comes. And I'll tell you, it doesn't make any difference if you leave this branch on the ground. You can, pipe in, all this stuff, to it, good music, developing a positive mental attitude and everything. It's not going to grow anything unless it's connected. And the same is true with us. There's another reason why producing gets valued over connecting. It has to do with how I feel about myself. I feel better about myself when I'm producing, man. And sometimes, if things are not going well in my relational world, man, I'll pump it up, We all do that, so that the production in our lives makes, the other pain seem less painful. At least if other people admire me and they think I'm doing a great job and are praising me, then life feels better. And connection is pretty hard to measure, isn't it? It's like, how are you loving God with all your heart, soul, strength, and mind? How do you know that? Are you loving other people as you love yourself? I don't know. That's pretty hard to tell. And so because it's so difficult sometimes to measure that, we then do the stuff that we can measure. There's a really great story from Jesus' life about doing versus being, okay? Now, guys, I know it's Father's Day, but this involves two sisters, okay? You probably have heard this story. Let me read it for you. As Jesus and the disciples continued on their way to Jerusalem, they came to a certain village where a woman named Martha welcomed him into her home. Her sister, Mary, sat at the Lord's feet listening to what he taught. But Martha was distracted by the big dinner she was preparing. She came into Jesus and said, "Lord, doesn't it seem unfair to you that my sister just sits here while I do all the work? Tell her to come and help me." Now, I know that Martha kind of takes the rap in this story and always has, She's kind of seen as, the older sister control freak, the Martha Stewart of the family, who's making sure that the napkins all get folded into little swans, and focusing on presentation, making the lamb is cooked just right, and everybody has little bowls of mint jelly right by their piece of lamb and stuff, and the glasses are spotless. She's just on the details, just like Martha Stewart, And actually, to be fair, Jesus shows up with 12 hungry men, okay? And him as well. And they're there for a meal and so on, and somebody's got to do the work, right? Now, it wasn't like, Mary was just sitting around, playing with her cell phone, checking her Instagram account. Who doesn't notice that her sister is not helping? And Martha is furious. She finally just had it. She comes roaring out of the shadows. Jesus, you got to do something about my lazy sister. And Jesus, in essence, says, "Martha, Martha, Martha. Martha. Love you, dear, but, really, your, workaholism and stuff like this. My dear Martha, you are worried and upset over all these details. There's only one thing worth being concerned about, and Mary has discovered it, and it will not be taken away from her." Now, notice what he's not saying, why are you doing all this worthless stuff? We don't need to eat. Well, of course they needed to eat, okay? He's simply saying that connection at this juncture of time especially is more important than production. See, he had just taught everybody, on what is most important in life, which is love. Love God with all your heart, soul, strength, and mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. And this snarky request from a Pharisee, so who actually is my neighbor? And Jesus then tells the story of the Good Samaritan and how he steps in and helps this Jewish guy that had been pounded. So the question could be asked is, does love serve nice dinners for friends? And the answer is, of course. But never at the expense of connecting. And you look at this juncture here and what's going on. Jesus is going to be dead in about 2 weeks. Martha only has so much time to be able to sit down. Mary, it's very interesting, is taking kind of the role of a disciple, which was illegal in that culture to actually do that. She's sitting there at Jesus' feet, which is kind of the metaphor for what it meant to be a disciple. And Martha is just like, she's on the dinner. I mean, she's getting it done. But she's missing the most important thing in the room that day. And that's what Jesus is saying. Now, in the same passage where Jesus tells us to be the branch, to stay connected, he also says, so here's a new command. I want you to love one another as I have loved you. And that's exactly what Martha wasn't doing. I mean, is it love when you humiliate your sister in front of all the disciples and in front of Jesus? No, it's not. So she kind of lost the plot. And we do that too. We get so busy, like we're on it, we're getting the grades and we're getting the accolades and, and building our resume and doing all this stuff. And we sometimes miss the most important thing in life. Jesus said the most important thing is learning how to love. That if love is not behind it, Paul said, then it's worth nothing. And when it comes to production over connection, when we start down that path, I mean, love gets to the point where it comes in second, or it comes in fourth, or it comes in 20th. Sometimes it disappears altogether. The connection is the most important thing that goes on. Because fruit comes from the connection. Fruit comes from the connection. So let's just go back to the story of Solomon, the big dog of achievement, and accumulation and production. I mean, nobody produced like him. When in humility, he told God that all he wanted was just wisdom to lead his people well. Listen to what happened after that. God says to him, I will give you what you asked for. I will give you a wise and understanding heart, such as no one else has ever had or ever will have. And I will also give you what you did not ask for, riches and fame. No other king in the world will be compared to you for the rest of your life. And that's who Solomon is, man. He's got the most thickest portfolio of accomplishments of anybody who's ever lived. And yet, in his arrogance, he demanded that all of his people, all of his employees, that they obey him. And yet he defied the one that he was supposed to obey. Every single command that God had given him, he blew off the charts, ignored. He wrote these words and then he flunked the test. The purity of silver and gold is tested by putting them in the fire. The purity of human hearts is tested by giving them a little fame. He got a little fame. He got a lot of fame. And he flunked the test. What happens is, you see, we forget what life is all about. We forget that what God wants is not a list of achievements and quotes from all the people who've been, who admire us and think we're just wonderful. He's looking for humility. And the only way to humility is to understand who we really are. And that's what Jesus is saying. He's saying, you need to stay connected to me, because apart from me, you can do nothing. That's who we are. At the end of his life, Solomon wrote the book of Ecclesiastes, and in there, he's kind of this bitter, jaded old leader. And he basically says, everything, I've done it all. I've achieved it all, man. When it came to, all the good things of life, man, I sucked the nectar out of everything. I had it all. And then he says this, it was all smoke and mirrors. It was spitting into the wind. It's worthless. And this is what it says about how God felt about Solomon. The Lord was very angry with Solomon, for his heart had turned away from the Lord, the God of Israel, who had appeared to him twice. He warned Solomon specifically about worshiping other gods, but Solomon did not listen to the Lord's command, giving out wisdom to everybody else, and yet ignored the wisdom that God had directly given to him. To the gods that Solomon built temples for, and it says that what happened was that, his wives from all these other places, they tempted him to kind of turn away from God and worship their gods, which he did, okay? And he built temples for them. Two of the temples that he built, one was for Ashtoreth, which was basically a prostitution cult. It was basically you go in and you have sex with one of the prostitutes in there, to basically symbolize fertility. And this was trafficking women. These were young women who had no other prospects, and they got trafficked in this temple prostitution. The other god was Moloch. And this is horrible, almost too horrible to say. But this god, by worshiping him, what they would do is they would heat up his hands, and then they would take their babies, their children, and they would place them in the red-hot hands of this god where they would literally die in his hands. That's what Solomon did to his own children. Solomon brought Israel to the golden era and then destroyed what he had built with his own hands. People do that, don't they? They build a company, and then they take the same hands that they built it with, and they tear it down again. The next in line after Solomon was his son Rehoboam, who took the throne after him. And he basically followed, Solomon's example and how he treated people. I mean, why is that surprising? The apple doesn't fall far from the tree. A whole delegation apparently came to him from the southern kingdom or from the northern kingdom, and they said to him about Solomon, they said, your father was a hard master, they said, lighten the harsh burden, harsh labor demands, and heavy taxes that your father imposed on us, and then we will be your loyal subjects. Now, his dad's advisors, who knew, he was a harsh guy to deal with and so on, they basically said, if you're willing to be a servant to these people today and give them a favorable answer, they will always be your loyal subjects. It's called servant leadership. But Rehoboam had never seen that in his dad. And so he asked all of his young friends, what do you think, And they think, you got to come down hard, just like your old man did, And so he goes in there and he says, you think you had it hard with my dad? Just wait till you see me. And it blew up the whole kingdom. And I'll tell you what, Solomon, with the way he treated people, like it just put the whole kingdom on this downward spiral. Connection is more important than production. And the quality in the middle of all this is humility. Us living with humility, us understanding who we are, us understanding who the other people are in our world are, and how we are taught to treat them. Now here's what's strange. In the record books of success and achievement and production, Solomon, man, he hit the top of the list. Like he was in Guinness World Book of Records. But in God's book, not so much. Not so much. And he tore down what he was supposed to build. How many of you would like to know how Kyle Martin finished his valedictorian speech that day? Let me read it for you. Working hard is good. It is, in fact, biblical. But it should not be done for the sole purpose of a goal's sake at the expense of relationship with others. Looking back on this year, I realized that the stress of this year for this goal in a 5-minute speech was paid for with the lack of attending to the relationships in my life. Nothing is more important than your healthy relationships. Nothing. Not your goals, not your successes. And as you live your life on this earth, there's no greater good than you can do for a person than to love them so much that you point them to Jesus Christ. But first, he should be the first relationship that you cannot neglect. Pretty powerful, isn't it, coming from a teenager? We live in a world where everyone at the top of the food chain, and we're talking like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos, and Bill Gates and Mark Zuckerberg, and Donald Trump and Justin Trudeau and Vladimir Putin, they would laugh you out of the room if you went in and said, you can't do anything without Jesus. So, look at what I've done, man. I became president. I became the chairman. I became, one of the richest people in the world, man. I accomplished. I did. And the question is, does it matter? Does it really matter? See, Jesus' summary of success is love God, love others, and love one another. And no matter what you accomplish, no matter what you have on your resume, no matter what company that you have with your name in big letters over the top of it, it really doesn't matter if you don't love. Here's the thing, you see, one day there will be the ultimate 16th second in our lives, where we have to look at all we've done versus the connection that we have. I mean, I suspect that one day on the other side, we're going to meet Solomon there and so on. And I'm just wondering how he's going to interact with the people that he trampled on. About all the people, the 150,000 slaves who were foreigners in this country that he used to go out and work the quarries. Wonder, what about the people, like the kids, the sons and daughters that he had and didn't have time to even say hello to hardly? I mean, they admired him, but they didn't know him. I wonder about the 700 wives and the 300 concubines, who he kept sequestered, who never had a life. These were daughters of the Most High God, and they were treated like he was trading baseball cards. I wonder about the kids that he sacrificed. I wonder about the women whose lives he ruined by having this temple to Ashtoreth. I wonder about all that stuff. Because you see, I think we have to face that, and we have to think about that. Solomon, he had a massive pile of gold and silver and awards and gifts from the Queen of Sheba that all got scraped off of him when he died. But he didn't take that with him, no. After every 15 seconds, the big win, the pay raise, the windfall, the achievement award, the milestone, the next big thing, there must be a 16th second. And for us, it's going to be when Jesus shows up and what he has to say about how we lived and whether we just went after achievement and buying and selling and making a name for ourselves, or whether we stayed connected with him and got connected with others. And so I want to ask, if you're really into, earning and accomplishing and doing, but not being, how's that working for you? Let's pray. God, I pray that you will help us in this life with the moments, months, years that we have to make sure that we focus on staying connected with you and bearing the fruit that we were created to bear, the fruit of love, joy, and peace, and patience, and kindness, helping others, loving others as we are called to do. Please help us to see that and help us to be that. In the name of Jesus, I pray. Amen. May God help you to see life clearly so that you can make sure that you get good at doing the right things. God bless you. Happy Father's Day.